Albert Einstein. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another segment of Straight Talk with Grover Thornton, the show that's designed to inform, to inspire, and educate. Let me say also, we need to let you know how government, local, state, and national impact our lives, along with other issues of great concern. Tonight, as usual, I always talk about Black history. I imagine you see this man from time to time on the television, and he say that Black history is every day. And we need to know more and more about our history and to pass our history down to our offsprings and from generations to generations. We cannot become so complacent that we don't care or you think we have it made, but we have not had it made. They're trying every day in a lot of areas to turn back the clock the way things was to the status quo. But we need to keep pushing forward with our race, and that's why I say Black history is every day, and it's instill pride, dignity, and awareness among ourselves, because we are the ones that must push our young people. And that's why I was saying things today, and that this program has been on the internet now for 1 year this month. And God has been very gracious for me to do that, to inform you. There's no question about it. Every man is born will die sooner or later. And every day, the moment you're born, the moment you start dying. And we all come to that period where we have to pass from life to death. So I will start off right now with on Black history. I'm going to show you, and I think it's real good. When I went to high school, in junior high school, we had to do reports, write about a certain person, and that's why they exchange ideas. Somebody may write about Dr. George Washington Carver, somebody may write about Booker T. Washington, etc. And as we move forward towards a more involvement into the mainstream of American life, then of course more great people came, more and more God raised up to help deliver us from the terrible calamities that we had to deal with, and we're still dealing with them. I have a very distinguished guest on my show tonight. Councilwoman Shabazz was supposed to have been here tonight, but she had a conflict with her schedule at the last moment, and she called me and she apologized for not being able to speak tonight, but she will be rescheduled sooner or later. And I have a very distinguished gentleman, one of the finest men that I have the respect for, that I work with in this community. And I know all the men who try to move this community forward, because I started working in the civil rights movement when I was 18 years old when I met Thurgood Marshall, and I was president then of the NAACP Youth Council. So therefore, I know people who have made a contribution, those who have and those who have not. And a lot of the late comers along, and a lot of time I say now, they were my age or in my group where they didn't do anything. But now they're jumping on the boat, on the train. That's all right. But when the train needed moving, they were nowhere around. But anyway, if they make a contribution to move the race forward, that's what I'm concerned about. Now, let me show you 3 outstanding people. I always talk about black folk and about this that we involved with today. I want to show you this gentleman right here. You will show Dr. Kanye first? Dr. George Washington Carver. He was a great scientist. In fact, white folk love him because he was the one that taught them with his experience how to cultivate the land, how to make their crops grow faster and better. And he in fact, he was so outstanding that Henry Ford, the developer of the Ford Company, automobile company, wanted him to work with him. And I remember reading some years ago that he was invited to the White House, and President Roosevelt sent the Secret Service at the train station to pick him up. And they were just looking for some outstanding, distinguished looking man. And there was a little small man, just ordinary gentleman. And one of the servicemen walked up to him and asked him, was he Dr. Carver? And he said he was. But he was a great man. In fact, he was the only black man that's in the museum in Alabama. But by white people put him in there. They had, he said, he saved the farmers. And that's what disturbs me. It disturbs me very much. When I think of all the great things I have told you from time to time, great accomplishments that black folks have made. And yet still, they still want to keep us second-class citizens. I don't understand it, never will understand it. And like I go to my grave saying, we have never had a democracy. How you gonna have a democracy when 500 of your citizens was lynched and people voted not to have an anti-lynching bill? How can you have a democracy? A democracy like Thurgood Marshall said one time, when everybody get the same time, you get the same thing at the same time. Now, the next person I want to show you was a very industrial lady, and this lady, Miss Walker, Madam Walker, the lady who did so much in the hair business. Now, I think she would be very disturbed today if she was alive to see all these hair things that are going on today. Personally, I don't like them. 9 out of 10, I don't like them. I don't. I think she'll be very disturbed. But she was the first black millionaire. This lady built a business. She built a magnificent business. And she did a lot for the hair industry for black women. The next person I want to show you today is, because I'm always having my segment with black people. It's, you got it? It's Frederick Douglass. And Frederick Douglass was a slave, and he escaped from slavery when he was young, and he was a slave in Baltimore and Maryland. And he became a very outstanding person during the abolition period. And he met many times with President Lincoln, pleading to him to emancipate slaves. So he was very fine in that manner. And he was outstanding. And when emancipation came, he was just elated over that fact. But he had a lot to do with putting the pressure on President Abraham Lincoln. Now, I read 5 books on Lincoln, and a lot of time I was the same with a lot of things about him. But he was not an abolitionist. Don't you want people to understand that? And some people want to say, well, we was a byproduct because over 5,000 men joined the Union Army to help for their own freedom. And of course, when Lincoln was assassinated, they had the 54th Regimental Band out of Massachusetts. They had the procession with his funeral in Washington. And of course, they took his body and they went from Washington to other places on down till they got to Illinois, where they buried him in Illinois, Springfield, Illinois, where President Obama went there to kick off his presidential campaign. See, a lot of people don't know these things. A lot of young people don't know these things, and they don't talk about these things in school. In fact, now down in Florida, Mr. DeSantis has this culture war going. He wants to take all the history about black folk out. And I got one I want to show you. This is an example. Show the public this picture. I showed you this little girl before. This little girl right here, and she was the first student in Louisiana to integrate that elementary school, and they took the kids out rather than have them go to school with this little 6-year-old girl, Ruby Bridges. She passed last. She was third, sixth guy, by being the only little girl. And if you can see, she was being escorted. She was being escorted by, excuse me. All right. We had a little breakup. I'm sorry. We back on that. You know how technology is. She was being escorted on this book, as you can see, about the United States Marshals. And what was so wonderful about this whole situation, a white woman came all the way from Boston, Massachusetts. She was a retired school teacher to teach that child. The white people took all the children out of the schools. I cannot understand it. I will never understand it. We are all human beings created by Almighty God. You can't tell God how to make his people. God will be a very bold God if you only had one race to look at, if you only had one flower to look at, if you only had one fish to look at. He made a multiplicity of things. You can look at flowers, and I'm a lover of flowers. You can look at flowers in one place, you go another place, and you see flowers you never saw before. So when you criticizing a black person or a white person, you're criticizing God's creation. You're criticizing God's creation. And I'm glad today I have an outstanding gentleman on this show tonight who is a minister, and I got several questions to ask him. Now, next thing I want to say is talk about here. Is this gentleman right here? This gentleman right here, and you can these two gentlemen right here on Miss Natalie. Mm-hmm. Now, this first gentleman here is Thurgood Marshall. I've told you about him before. And all our black children ought to know about these people I'm telling you about, because they're trying to take black history out of the schools. They started one place, they're going to another place. And the next time I talk about education, I'm going to tell you about the two types of education you had. One was purposely segregated the kids, and the other one was not. But anyway, Thurgood Marshall went before the Supreme Court, the first black put on the Supreme Court, one of the finest constitutional lawyers in the history of the country. And he fought against, in the court, against the man named Judge Davis. He became one of the finest constitutional lawyers, this white gentleman. And South Carolina paid him at that time in the 50s, which was like $1 million a day. They paid him $125,000 for the South to try to keep black folk in separate schools. In a democracy. Unbelievable. And Lincoln said it was hypocritical that people would think of us as a hypocrites of the world, and we'd run around talking about democracy, and we had slavery. We had discrimination, segregation. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And the country is going all over the world talking about democracy. But Thurgood Marshall went before the Supreme Court 32 times. 32. And lost only 3 cases. Won 29 cases. Almost 90%, way over 90% of his victories. And this other gentleman here, that was the man that he and his wife were the ones that gave Thurgood Marshall all the information that we needed to show that black children were being stigmatized because of the color of their skin, as if God made a mistake. So this man, Mr. Kenneth, what's the last name? I forgot.
Clark.
That's right, Clark. My mind got so many things on it. Mr. Kenneth Clark and his wife, they were psychologists. And one of the things that Mr. Clark did, Mr. Clark showed the court with documentation from other people. He was a psychologist in New York, went to the United School, and his wife. And what they did, I told you before, they took 3 dolls, and they took 3 children, and the black children, and asked them to go play with those dolls. Bring me the doll that you think is pretty. And they brought the white doll. Bring me the doll that you want to play with. They brought the white doll. Those type of things that showed the court how the color of one's skin made the determination that that's a bad child and a good child. Unbelievable. And then, of course, in Mr. Thurgood Marshall's honor, when I go to the post office again, I didn't know until the other day. I read that he had a stamp in his name. We have a lot of stamps. But you go to the post office, they don't be giving you no stamps with black folk. Now, when I'm going to, last time I went to get stamps, they give me Christmas stamps. Well, I wonder why is that? I got to call the post office and ask why we get Christmas stamps. And they must have had a lot of left over to get rid of them first. But I don't never get no stamps with no black people on it. And next time I go, I'm going to ask for one for Thurgood Marshall or some other black. And we ought to do the same thing. Because that's where we educate our children and they're going to have the pride. Now, of course, this month, Dr. King, the mother, April the 4th, is a sad month in our life as black people. When Dr. King was assassinated. And I was pleased to say that I had an opportunity to meet him and to sit next to him on 611 West 36th Street. That was my pastor's house. Dr. Jackson was pastor First Time Baptist Church at that time, and he had recently gotten out of prison. But anyway, I had an opportunity to shake his hand and sit next to him on the sofa and on 36th Street, 611 West 36th Street. And this great man, Reverend Stale, who's deceased now, former pastor of Bethlehem Baptist Church here in Savannah, was telling me about Dr. King. Father used to always bring him to the Missionary Baptist Convention every year. And he was a young boy. And he was very, 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 very active, very enthusiastic, and a person that was asking questions. What did I remind you of? The greatest man ever walked the face of the earth. His mom and daddy were looking for him. They journeyed headlong. And where was he? And there was Jesus, 12 years old, just outstanding and brilliant mind, talking to all the leaders and asking questions. And of course, the mom and them came and said they were worried about him. And he said, don't you know, it's about time I be about my father's business. So Dr. King he was the first black, in fact, this is history in itself, I'm going to tell you, that Dr. King, there are only 2 people in this nation that will have the honor of a national holiday. And Dr. King and other person is George Washington. Great as Lincoln was, he does not have a national holiday. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this is show this picture. A lot of people I keep these memorabilia that have. That's a picture when Dr. King was honored. They accorded him the highest honor that a citizen could have in this nation, a federal holiday. Only 2 people have that distinct honor, George Washington and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now I want to move on for this nation with all this prosperity that we have. And I want to say this first. I was really shocked when I read this article the other day in the AARP organization that in this nation, I want to show that lady, and she's not the only one. We just had that lady at the show, but there are over 137 million senior citizens in the greatest country on the face of the earth. Over 137 million cannot have ends to meet. They're suffering for medication, to pay rent, to pay utilities, and many times food. But look what we're spending. Look what we're spending. And show this with Natalie. I want the public to see. I want the public to see this. That's a picture. It's kind of small. I hope you can see, but you can listen to what I say about it anyhow. That is a picture of a F-14 or 15 airplane, fighter plane. The cost, ladies and gentlemen, one plane, $80 million. You see for yourself. That's why President Eisenhower, before he retired, he spoke to the nation and told the nation to watch the industrial military complex. We'll say it again. The industrial military complex. That is, the Defense Department looks out for the welfare of the nation. And we have the first Sergeant General now is Secretary of Defense, Mr. Austin, which I'm very proud. The first time a black man is looking out for the whole nation with the Defense Department. But look, they want to purchase 2,500 of them at $80 million a plane. And look at the suffering that I just read to you, that the lady just showed you. 137 million senior citizens. And when President Biden made his State of the Union address, he talked about doing things for the citizens, of the senior citizens. And that's what they really need to do. We have a lot of our senior citizens, they have dementia. When they go into these private places, and the upkeep is tremendous. Some of them want $1,500 a week, but close to about $60,000 a year. How many poor people can afford that? When somebody has dementia, they need to be well kept. And a lot of them have been citizens and paid taxes all of their lives, and they should have a better resource coming from the government taking care of them. So now, one of the things I want to talk to, also I want to inform you, is that we need to talk about what they're doing in Florida about books. Books are a great thing for people to do, to read, to learn, to educate your children. But now they want to take that same book, that little girl out, and also I want to look at this gentleman right here. And this is why they're fighting and demonstrating against Mr. Sanders in Florida. And that is this. This gentleman right here, Roberto Clemente, he was a great baseball player for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And the earthquake struck Nicaragua. He was from one of the Latin American countries. And he aboarded a small plane to take help, food, other essentials to help them, and the plane crashed. So somebody wrote a book about him. And the children cannot read that book about him. They cannot read that book about that little girl, Ruby Bridges, because it's that no good man, DeSantis. Who wants a president? He wants to run for president. You got to get out and vote. Vote, vote, vote. Who wants a man like him president? A racist president? We already got a dummy we had who wrecked the country, wanted to paralyze democracy. We don't need that. So I wanted to tell you about those three things. Now, before I bring my guests on here, I want to make something very clear. A gentleman called me and he asked me, he said, Mr. Thorne, would you explain to me about some of my friends said, they're going to take their monies out of the bank. My. But you don't understand some things, then of course you ask. Those two banks went bankrupt, ladies and gentlemen, and had to run on the bank. When people went to get their money, all their money was out of the bank gone. Now all this happened back there during the 30s, when they had the Great Depression. Sometimes I got pictures of people lining for food. It was terrible. And that's when President Roosevelt came in, created jobs and all that. I have to go into that sometime, but not tonight. But I just want to tell you about these banks. Congress passed a law. When you go in these banks, you see a big old sign in there somewhere in that bank, FDIC. And that stands for the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. That means your bank money is safe. Now up to $250,000. Now, if you got $1 million, I wouldn't put it all in that bank, because they're going to show up to $250,000. Now, these two banks that went bankrupt, they were not. I was shocked to find out that about a week or two ago when they were talking about this on the morning news program, that these two banks were not a member of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So people putting their money in a bank that was not even secured. However, the federal government moved fast and quickly, and we got money from the Federal Reserve, where the money is. All the country is broken down in different districts with Federal Reserves. And the Federal Reserve is a banker's bank. And that's where they got the money to put the money back in. Now, all these people who own these banks were not a member of the Federal Reserve, these two banks. All of those investors, these people that own the banks, they lost their money, and the government is not going to replenish that money to them. That's their loss. And I don't know what they're going to do for us, making them repay this money. Maybe they don't have no assets to do, and maybe they do. Now, I haven't heard no report from that, but I can tell you the government moved very quickly to make sure that the depositors did not lose their money. Because what happened in the 30s, and the banks went broke like that, to run on the bank, a lot of people lost millions and millions. Some people committed suicide, jumped out of buildings. It was terrible. So that's why the Institute that I was shocked, because it looked like the government would not allow anybody to establish a bank unless they were a member of the FDIC. So you don't have to worry about your money. Everybody got their money, and the Secretary of the State Treasury of the government, and I think it's whatever her name is, Yellen or whatever it is, but she made sure that all the depositors, like the president said, they got their money. So they can't go around and say they lost their money. Biden called somebody lost their money. And I'm sick of it, they're putting everything on Mr. Biden. I guess it's something happened in Turkey, Mr. Biden responsible for that. Inflation is high everywhere. Like, for instance, the war have a great impact on merchandise. The supply line is short. Like wheat, Syria. Ukraine was one of the big producers of the world for grain. But how can they produce grain when they're trying to save their lives fighting Russia? And then Russia turned around with all the gas side. Oh, but the Biden got something to do with the gas side. The man went into the Strategic Reserve, took out billions of dollars, millions of dollars worth of oil so we keep the economy going. The president can't do but so much. He can't tell the Russians what to do, and Russia made it even worse. Said you're gonna have to buy stuff with Russian money. Well, if Russia had not bought your goods, how you gonna get Russia's money? And then we allow China just about everything. You look at the stuff you buy, made in Taiwan, made in China, all that stuff. These countries going overseas, so they starved American workers where they can get all these merchandising goods at a lower price being manufactured. That affects the economy. $15 an hour. That you can't live with that. You can't live with no $15 an hour. And the people get mad with Dr. King because he was going to put no pressure on the government. That they got to do something about these people suffering. I just showed you 37 million people do not have the right things to live and exist. Now, I think I'm going to bring my guest on here tonight in the rest of the few minutes. And that gentleman is Dr. Leonard Smalls, the man who I had the highest respect for. Dr. Smalls, are you with me?
I'm here.
How are you tonight, sir?
I am magnificent.
You know, you've always been one of my idols. Not idols, I know I was into a God and Christ. You know what I meant? A man that I looked up to. And you know, Reverend Smalls, what I cannot understand, I watch Reverend Barber. I know you know of him.
Yes.
He's always on the TV talking about economic policies, economic conditions, even in places where they don't want to give people a decent wage to live. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm gonna tell the people one day I did what I did. I called the local office and got just how much money the congressman made. And I turned around and computed everything, even up to the hour, what they made an hour. One of them over $100-something an hour, and they don't want to give you $15. That's ridiculous. Well, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing magnificent.
Fine, and Miss Smalls did also. Now I want to ask you a question, sir. Let's look at the question I want to ask you about this killing in Tennessee. That's why I didn't mention it until you got on the show. This killing in Memphis, Tennessee. And you heard me talking about how this cultural war that DeSantis doing, taking all the books about Black history. They don't want, like I said on the show one time, if you had anybody in your family that ever had an operation and need blood, thank God for the black man that created the blood bank.
Amen.
This culture war now, sir, that leading into Pennsylvania, these two young men, and I took my hats off to them. They stood. What you think about that whole situation? What's your view?
My view is twofold. First of all, the Republican Party and the whites, principally in the Republican Party, are at a minimum schizophrenic, in the sense that they say they're the right to life policy, and at the same time have passed measures for open carry in states that they run. When I say open carry, I mean that means that any person could go to a gun store and without a license, without a permit, without a background check, buy as many guns as they want to. And particularly in Florida, where DeSantis is, with the stand your ground rules, if two people are alone somewhere, I could kill you. And all I've got to do is say that I felt threatened and you approach me. Without a witness, I have a right to kill you. And most people don't extrapolate these things to their nth, to how bad it can be. It can become open season on African Americans worse than it is now. And right now it's at epidemic proportions.
Yes, it is.
And as far as in Tennessee, the people are protesting their liberal, extreme gun laws. The other day when DeSantis signed that new law for open carry, unlicensed carry in Florida, he had it with the IRA. I mean, the gun lobby. What do you? Come on. What are you thinking? He had that. So it's really just business. People, believe it or not, the babies are being abandoned by the government for business.
Exactly.
For campaign donations.
Yes, sir.
And in Tennessee, the gun lobby runs that legislature. So what we've got to do is we've got to amass our voting strength. We've got to vote folks out. And the other thing, African American, particularly African American ministers, like you mentioned, Pastor Barber, this is what I saw that bothered me in Tennessee. I saw the demonstrations, but I didn't see Black ministers. And when those people demonstrated in the Capitol and laid on the floor,
yeah,
I saw 2 or 3 Blacks, but a floor full of young white people.
Yes, sir.
Black folk have got to get in the game.
They got to get in the game.
That we're going to be the first ones shot. We're going to be
the
first ones locked up. We're going to be the first ones fired. We're going to be the first ones displaced. We're going to be the first people to have our history erased and our dignity besmirched. And we're going to be the first people. And we are the first people in the history of the Tennessee State House to ever have people expelled from their elected office without having committed a crime or an offense of moral turpitude. They stood up for their rights and got expelled from their elected offices.
You know, Reverend Smalls, back then in the 40s or early 50s, Reverend, he was a minister, Apostolic Baptist Church, Reverend Clayton Powell. He was a powerful man in the Congress, and then he had been in there so long from New York. He moved up to a chairman position, and his chairmanship was education. And President Howard, they couldn't stand him because every time they put a piece of legislation and he was chairman of the committee, if he did not say integrate the schools or do this, the other, they got angry with him. And then, of course, he had a very relations with a lot of white women. Just tell it like it is. He would go down to Bimini with them white women on the boat and stuff. They couldn't crack up because white folks couldn't stand that.
Well, it was his idol.
They crack up out there. They crack up. But here's the point I'm trying to mention. They censored him they put him out of the Congress. People voted him right back in. That's what they're saying. That's
Yeah.
going to happen to these boys. And
Yeah, but here's the thing. The difficulty is they put those young men out. Tennessee has a Republican House and a Republican Senate,
yeah,
but they have a Democratic governor. Okay. Now, I don't know what the rules are. I haven't read enough on it yet, but I will probably before the sun comes up tonight, because that's what I do. I stay up all night reading.
me
And
too.
so what I'm thinking is they might have to either appoint or have a special election to fulfill those seats, because I don't think it's legal for them to keep the seats open, and those between the two of them, probably 1.5 million people unrepresented.
That's what they said, and they say that some group that overlooks the elections, overlook at them, would probably reappoint them, and then like you just said, they may have to vote again. But then the same people can get run from the office and they get elected again. It may wind up in the Supreme Court, who knows? But what got me about these guns? We've had, and we only had 1/4 of the year, January, February, March. 1/4 of the year is gone, and we've had 140 mass shootings in this country. No other country in the whole world
That's right.
had that type of condition going on in that country. And you would think, sir, and what made me surprised, you would think that they wouldn't go on like that. Not all children are children. Jesus said, suffer the little children to come unto me and forbid them not. So
Amen.
he loves all the little children. Here's the point. They were fighting for all children, white children, and they didn't give a rap about the white children. They are committed to the NRA. I don't care what nobody's saying. All of them, Cruz and all of them, they get campaign finance money from the NRA. And you would think the manufacturers of the weapons would say, look, we've had enough. They're killing all these children in the school. But what do they care? They're making money.
Listen, and here's the thing. They used to say, well, it's time to mourn and pray now, and it's, we shouldn't change the law when it's emotional. And then after the thing is over, they still don't change it until the next one. Then they say the same thing, and they got tired of just praying. But the thing is, until we can take those folks to the proper resolve, until we can get them to the circumstance where they understand they can't keep those officers without us, which means black folk have to register and vote.
Yeah, we got to get out and vote.
That's just the bottom line is, if we don't register and vote, the cat's gonna eat our supper, as the old folks used to say.
Yes, exactly.
We need to get out and register and vote. And the thing is, they count how many of us vote. They count how many of us don't. And they treat us accordingly.
Exactly.
Every time we've been seriously interested as a fist in electing somebody for national office, they won. The Russians played with us as if they were Black Lives Matter and saturated our cities like Detroit and Philadelphia with propaganda about Hillary Clinton. They acted as if this really happened when Hillary ran against Clinton. They acted as if they were black, and they discouraged black people. So CNN and those, when the votes were coming in at the end of the night, they was wondering, well, what happened to Philadelphia? What happened to Detroit? What happened to Columbus, Ohio? And they was going, wait a minute, these numbers aren't right. That's why they were so surprised, because black folk drank the Kool-Aid and did not come out and vote in those cities, saying, well, we ain't so crazy about Hillary. They passed the law and crime law and stuff like that. We need to become more educated so we won't end up getting bamboozled right here in the city of Savannah. Right here in the city of Savannah.
And another thing too, we have things in Savannah that, I'm a very candid person. That's just me. That things will be happening, and we don't have nobody be speaking out on them. Like you said, but
I'm doing the best I can.
You're about the only preacher I know. You ain't Reverend Benny Mitchell, and that guy was like, I remind Reverend Barber on the television. He lays it down like it is. And a lot of people crack up because the man takes a stand. And then if you, like Dr. Gilbert said one time, I shall never forget, and you know he did a lot of things in this city.
Oh,
And
yeah.
by the way, his precious, lovely wife, Mrs. Gilbert, she passed. And she was 102 years old.
My Lord, she passed. She just passed.
Yeah, last week. And she's 102 years old.
Beautiful
And
woman.
she went all over Georgia getting membership for the NAACP.
Yep.
And we could not vote. See, people, that's why I do this history, sir, to let our people know. We got a long ways to go. We have not arrived yet, and we can't be so preoccupied that, like you just saying, the rest of the vote. We could not even vote in the Democratic primary. Dr. Gilbert went all the way around the state of Georgia. And Ms. Gilbert raised the money for the Primus case. There were two ministers. The head man was Dr. Primus, a minister in Columbus, Georgia.
Georgia.
He filed a suit to vote into the Democratic primary. And Dr. Gilbert went all over Georgia, set up 40 NAACP chapters.
Sure did.
And black folk working and voted. Now we got a better chance. We've been shot, beaten up, and everything, the right to vote. And we will not do it. We got to get out and vote. And these people that doing these things against black people or history, we need to eliminate them from office.
Well,
we need to eliminate them.
People need to know that the pastor of First African Baptist Church in Savannah is basically the father of the NAACP for the state of Georgia. And people need to know that. That's a piece of history.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
The other thing people need to know, you think that this thing about putting somebody off of an elected office is just the one in Tennessee. That's the one you got to see. That's the one you got to know. This is happening all over the United States in pockets. Two of the ladies who were elected in Fayetteville ended up resigning because of how they were being treated early in their tenure on council. In Jessup, Georgia, one of the men have been voted off in Jessup, Georgia. You got to understand, these plays that they're running, because we're not really up with everybody's information, they're running these plays over and over in different areas, and seeing that we're not opposing them properly, we're not taking them to court, we're not challenging them properly, and so we're losing. I believe personally that it would be against the law if they sued, because I believe that law whereby they remove those men for that offense, I think it's unconstitutional.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And coming back home in Savannah, I saw where all 9 of the council members voted to remove Calhoun off that square. We do not have one square named after a black woman or a black man in Chatham County, Savannah. And I was proud to see when the paper said, 9 of these people voted. So the problem is, I'm going to ask you, if they voted to remove the racist man who was the vice president in the 1800s, and his words were this, I got the books to show you. He was saying that slavery was not an evil, but a good thing for the Negro. Can you believe that?
That's what he said.
That's what he said.
Actually said that was a quote.
That was a quote from what he said. Now, why I said this, here's my reason I'm going to ask you. If 9 people voted to remove him off the square, why they don't want to go in and name it after that black woman, Miss Susan Taylor, King Taylor? I got 4 words. I got 4 words. What is that? What is it?
Van Slick Willie Johnson.
Say that again.
Van Slick Willie Johnson.
Well, that's terrible.
Van Johnson, when they were getting ready to vote, he established that he said, now this wasn't voted, this wasn't on the agenda. He said before they voted to remove the name that they were not going to, in this meeting, vote on naming the square after Susie B.
And that's what I couldn't understand. I got
the rules are simple. The city of Savannah, the council of Savannah doesn't have to do all this that they're doing. They have never used this procedure to name anything in the history of Savannah. They do have this little thing in the ordinance where they could use this way, but not the Floyd Adams building downtown, not any of the squares, not any of the monuments, not any of the community centers. Nothing has taken all this to do. Van has a pathological hatred for African Americans in the spirit of Clarence Thomas. He puts hurdles in the way of Black people. He paved roads in the way of white people.
I can't believe that. I can't believe that. It's a disgrace.
All it would take is a motion, a second, and a vote, and that square would be named for Susie King Taylor.
That's what I can't understand. Didn't understand the mayor. I don't know. I haven't read that. I just want to understand. You're saying things down. I'm hoping the people will listen. I can't understand why they can't be named for that, and why they want to open it up to say the mayor now. I don't know. To name it after somebody else. They want to open it up to name somebody else. What kind of play is that?
That's the mayor. That's not.
That's terrible.
Council. That's not the council, because the council never voted for that.
No, the council voted 9-0 to name the thing after the move.
No, they voted 9-0
to move that man.
To take the name off, but Van established when they were talking about the vote to take his name off. Van established that he would not allow them at that meeting to make a motion to change the name. And then he waited 5 months and then came up with this procedure. In other words, well, the thing is, no other square, no other building, no other street. Did they take that long?
No, sir.
Wait a minute. To name the park for the Ross girl out on Eisenhower Drive? Did it take that long for that?
No, sir.
No. I mean, did they take that long to name the Johnny Mercer Theater?
No, sir.
Did they go through all that?
No, sir. They immediately turned around and named that thing after that man. I want the public to know Johnny Mercer was a singer and a songwriter. I want you to understand that. Yeah. He was very known. A lot of people may not know.
They didn't do all.
No, sir. No, sir. They voted immediately to name that make that change.
Make a motion, get a second, and vote.
And that's why people got to remember these things when voting time comes. Are you for Black folks? Are you pushing us ahead? Are you keeping us behind? These are the things we got to remember. I told you over and over and over, you and I have talked on the telephone, and I was saying to you, am I not in Rivers Falls?
That's right.
Do I not call you and discuss you, ask you certain things?
Yes, sir.
Why they don't speak out on things? Let me tell you what Dr. King said about the ministers. And it's all time, about 5 more minutes of my show. But let me tell you what Dr. King said and why we can't wait. I got the book to show you. Anytime I say anything on this show, I can back it up. I don't get on here and say what I don't know. Now, I'm letting you telling me about the procedure with the mayor and the situation. I don't have that information, but I'm glad you're sharing it to the people. And these are things we got to remember when it's time to vote. Are you supporting me? What are you doing for the race? And what Dr. King said is, and you're a minister, so I can't put you in that crowd. I can't put you in. But here's what he said, Reverend Small. He said, these ministers, first thing he said this, I got the book to show you. The ministers speak to more people than anybody else in the community.
That's it.
On Sundays, who else got a group of people to speak to? The ministers.
That's true.
And he said that the ministers must come out of these pulpits and get involved. And Chester Dunham used to say it all the time when I was on the show with him. And he said this. He says, a wonderful thing to be talking about going to heaven and enjoying all the beautiful things that God will have while you're living in this earth in hell, surrounded by all of this great prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ministers are not speaking, not doing anything. I know when the crime was going on, I suggested the ministers, you remember when all the crime was going on, that gang, that Gibbons gang and all that?
Oh, yeah.
I said, we need to get the ministers together on Saturday, break the city down. They know exactly where most of the crime was being held.
Sure.
All the ministers had to conduct and say, okay, on Saturday, let's move the street. Let's go this place. Let's do this. And talk to these young men. Let's try to get these men involved and try to get themselves to Christ and make a better lives for themselves. but they didn't do it. Real Small, I sure, I've been talking to you a long time, and I'm going on 90 years old now. I thank God for that. I don't know how long I got, but I can say that I'm glad I made contributions for the unborn generation of black children that have not even been born yet, if God left the world. Now, Reverend Small, the conclusion here, let me say this to you, men of the clergy, that this is a beautiful weekend. This is the time. A man who never sinned was made to be sin so that we can become what? The righteousness of God in him.
Amen.
And I glory Christ tonight for the sacrifice that he made and gave for us. I looked at the TV yesterday morning on the Morning Joy, looking at it every morning on the news, and there was a Catholic a minister, there was a Muslim minister, and there was a Jewish rabbi. And the bottom line was this: when they got through, I said, "Okay, that's good. That's what y'all doing." I said, "But I wish I could say to you two, to the rabbi and to the Muslim man, what y'all saying working together is this. But y'all, man, leader, they're dead. They never rose again." But Christ,
they have not accepted.
And they have not accepted him because God sent Christ to the Jews first. It was the Apostle Paul that brought the Gentiles into the religion. Is that right?
That's true.
So I thank you very much, sir. And I just hope the world will try to be a better world. But we cannot do anything without God. If we realize that this is God's world, he's the creator. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I know who holds tomorrow.
Amen.
And I'm saying this, that I hope all of us will just pray to have a better world. This country has never been in this kind of condition. All because of the evil of one man. Just like Adolf Hitler tore up Germany.
That's it.
They worship him. And that's what they're doing. Nobody wants to criticize Trump. Well, like that boy Mike can say, he has never accepted responsibility.
That's right.
But the day would come when what the Bible says, and I'm finished. Fret not yourself because of evildoers, but it soon be cut away like grass. Is that right, Rev?
That's right.
So I thank you very much, sir, and I want to let the public that we'll have a nice Easter, and let us raise our children to Christ. The churches don't even have Sunday schools anymore. The children are learning about him. But we got a long ways to go. God has brought us a long ways, and we have turned our chariots souls against him. We have worshiped idolism of drugs, of not going to church, and all our lives been on material. There's nothing wrong with material things, but he comes first. So I want to wish everybody a nice Easter, and let all of us try to make ourselves a better person, beginning with my own self. That God will be pleased with what we would do. And again, Reverend Smalls, I'm going to keep you from coming from time to time on the show because you're such an inspiration. You speak out on the issues, and that's what we need. God bless you, and I hope you will live many more years and keep doing. God bless you, my elder.
I appreciate your contribution to us, and I just want to tell everybody to listen to me very carefully. Follow the money. When you see pastors not showing up, it's because they're getting these little stipends and these little grants.
That's terrible.
And I'm just telling you what God loves. I'm telling you what God loves. I'm telling you the truth. And
I know.
And they're thinking that if they don't stand up, they're going to get loans to build churches or to buy houses and cars. But I am a living witness.
Yes, sir.
All my help, like David said, all my help
comes from the Lord.
Thank you for having me, my friend.
And I thank you. God bless you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and have a bright one Easter. And let's keep God and Christ in Easter. Thank you.
Like that.
this. I like 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 this.